Matt Cooperholtz, the fact that I spell my name like that should be a dead giveaway. I've been a nerd for a long time. Nat started with this concept, but I think it's important to reinforce that AI is not one thing, it's a whole bunch of technologies, and these are technologies that we call exponential technologies, which means they're not just getting better linearly, they're getting better exponentially. And that started with the fact that the number of processors we're fitting on a chip has been doubling since the integrated circuit was invented in the mid-50s, doubling every year or 18 months. The thing about doubling is it's hard for us to get our heads around, and it's especially hard for culture to follow something that doubles. If I take 30 linear steps, I'll be at the back of the auditorium. If I take 30 exponential steps, 1 step, then 2, then 4, then 8, 30 times, I'll be at the moon. We don't have an intuitive grasp for how quickly things change. The greeting card you buy today that plays happy birthday when you open it has more computing power than the whole world had in the 1950s. Yet it's become completely disposable. And the exponential group of technologies called AI is driven by this exponential computing power. It's driven by the exponential availability of data. It's given by our exponential ability to move that data around, communications technologies. Now, it's just a tool. It's smart sand smashed with lightning, really. The hammer is a tool as well, but the hammer is a linear tool. The car is a linear tool. The coal-fired power station is a linear tool. Things only get to be exponential when they're released from the physical world, and it's ideas that can build exponentially, like AI, to very quickly take us to a place that's different to where we thought we'd be, because in our mind we extrapolate linearly. So Arthur C. Clarke famously said that any sufficiently advanced technology will be indistinguishable from magic. And you could imagine that if you took your mobile phone to some ancient tribe and you showed them YouTube or a photo of themselves, they'd be like, bowing down in worship to this incredible God in this little piece of shiny glass. But what we just saw from Microsoft also feels a little bit like magic, right? Well, I'm here today to take that magic away. And I'm also here to get you to be absolutely blown away by the potential of this, especially as we ride the exponential curve. So let's remove the magic. I've already talked about a bit of maths. I'm going to use a little bit more maths. It's not going to be beyond year 10 maths. And with year 10 maths only, you are going to understand exactly how these things work. Let's have another quick look at the magic. It was 11:34 p.m. On a dare and to write an article, I said before midnight, I'm going to use ChatGPT to find out something about something I know not much about, which is marketing. And I'm going to ask successive questions for the next 26 minutes, which I obviously can't do given the very tight timing. I'm going to blaze through it, but this is the actual transcript, no modifications. I know nothing about formulating marketing strategy. What are the steps and components? Here's a go. I knew market research might be relevant. I asked about that. I said, okay, my business is actually digital communications powered by ChatGPT, and then in a very meta way, asking ChatGPT to help me about it. How do I define that target audience? So the way you use ChatGPT best is a successive conversation that understands that it's got tokens from all of the previous discussions. So it talked about target audience. It was the first thing it brought up here. So I then say, well, what about the target audience? And it gives me an idea, and I look at that and I say, all right, I've decided who they are based on your recommendation. It says, that sounds like a great business idea. It might be a little bit biased. Okay, so what are the characteristics of the target audience? What could their needs be? You said understanding their needs was important. Now that I've identified them and their needs, in other words, think about what you just told me, what's the next steps I should take? Marketing goals. Well, what are the marketing goals? What should I consider? Look, that's way too general. Can you actually just give me the answer? So here are specific marketing goals. Oh God, I don't have a website yet. What should be in my website? Can you write the homepage for me? It's actually going to deliver the services digitally. What else could that be? Okay, well, what could the services be in general? Now, how are they differentiated by using ChatGPT? Okay, great, we're ready to go. Write me something for LinkedIn. This is a good start. I probably need a name. Okay, with that name, what about some imagery? Okay, I'm going to use another AI tool called Midjourney. Give me a prompt to put into Midjourney that reflects the right imagery. You mentioned that a call to action was important. What might they look like? If I use paid advertising, tell me about keywords. How can my audience find it besides? Hey, these aren't questions I'm making up. These are questions that occurred to me from the previous answer. And bear in mind, this whole conversation took place in 25 minutes. What do I do to maximise my SEO ratings? Give me some code to put in my website to do that, please. And the money shot, I had this one up my sleeve actually with 1 minute to midnight. I've got a CSV file with all my contacts in it. There are 3 columns: email address, business name and business type. Can you write me some Python code that I can run that takes this file as an input, generates a separate file for each business named appropriately for me to mail merge, where the content of each file is a personalised message generated by you, ChatGPT, that considers their business type and also everything else we've just talked about and has a call to action? Sure, here's the code. You run that code, point it at the CSV, suddenly I've got 10,000 personalised messages with everything it's just learnt about the business. And with 1 minute to midnight left, I flipped to Mid-Journey and generated some imagery for the website as well. 26 minutes, massive productivity lift. And by the way, if you're curious about string theory, or in fact anything, this is the journey you can have. It's no longer the rich kids with the tutors who've got all the time in the world to teach them things. Okay, so that was AI, yeah? What else is AI? We all suddenly realise that this is AI because the exponential curve, we're on such a steep bit of it. But I've been working with AI almost every day for 20, 25 years, and it hasn't always been that. It's a massive collection of technologies. And to work with a understanding of AI, I invite you to consider that intelligence is not only for humans. Intelligence is anything that takes inputs and produces some output, possibly with feedback loops. To do that artificially, in other words, not with wetware, but with something else, maybe some silicon or some electricity or some light or some quarks, is to make an artificial intelligence. And that's too big to get our heads around. So I divide it into 2 spectrums. It's narrow if it's only doing one thing very, very simply, like a traffic light. It's general if it's doing the sort of stuff that we saw Copilot doing. It can do a whole bunch of different stuff. And then the other spectrum is, have we taken humans out of the loop or are we leaving them in the loop? And that's not binary. How much are the humans remaining involved in the process? If it's simple and they're in the loop, it's an AI, it's an assisted intelligence. It's assisting us. If it's general and we're still in the loop, it's augmenting us. Copilot is clearly an augmented intelligence. If we're taking humans out of the loop and it's simple, it's automated. And if we take humans out of the loop and it's general, it's both terrifying and massively exciting at the same time. It's moving up and to the right. That's an autonomous intelligence. And all 4 of these, when the task is to predict something unknown, because there are other tasks, classify something, describe something that's happened. But let's focus on prediction. And this is where we're going to tear back the curtain and everyone's going to understand exactly how these things work. There's only 4 steps, and it's divided into 2 steps for training, building the model, and 2 steps for using the model. The 2 steps to train a model, train a machine to learn, some machine learning, is you present the machine with a bunch of data where you know both the inputs and the output. You say, here's a bunch of stuff. We know the output, we know the input. Build a model so that I can give you new inputs and you'll predict the output. That's called training. Then we've built the model. We now present data where we only know the inputs and it predicts the output for us. Pretty simple concept, right? Where would you start? Well, we all started in year 10. When we got a bunch of data in 2 dimensions and we wanted to fit a straight line between them called linear regression, we were presenting, and linear regression can be described as a machine learning technique, so you've all actually been doing AI for at least a couple of years. You can present this data many times over, an X and a Y, and it will fit a straight line described by the formula y equals mx plus c, and you can now present new x's and get a y out. Does everyone remember doing this in year 10? So you've built models that generalise data to be used for new data already. So what are large language models? Exactly the same thing. I'm going to present a bunch of data where I know the output. What's the output? In this random sentence or in this random paragraph, what's the next word? It's that simple. So you take a bunch of text, as much as you can get your hands on, all of GitHub, all of Wikipedia, all of the newspaper articles, all of the papers ever published, and you feed it in withholding that last word, and you train it to get very, very good at predicting the next word. Then once you're happy with that, lock it down, and you suddenly give it a prompt and it predicts the next word. But we saw ChatGPT doing a lot more than the next word, right? Well, that's simple. Just take the text with the next word, pump it back in again and get the next word. That's why you see it tick, 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 tick on the screen. It's just looping around itself. Now, it's clearly not just a linear regression, but the exciting thing is it's actually just a bunch of linear regressions. That's all that's inside the box. Linear regression on steroids. In fact, there's 1 trillion of them. There are 1 trillion linear regressions all chained together into what we call a deep learning reinforcement neural network. It doesn't matter, just call it a black box. But understand that if I can build a black box that does the task well enough, and the task is predict the next word, and I then loop that around, you now understand that simply by stacking year 10 maths on top of itself to the power of 1 trillion, and presenting it with enough data to learn about the next word, there's no understanding going on in there. It's just something that's very good at predicting the next word. There's a couple of other tricks. Technically, it doesn't have the same kind of encoder as many transformers. It's got an intention mechanism, but that doesn't really matter. The idea is that instead of feeding it every possible word, we symbolise these. We squash them into a smaller space. And in fact, there's a really interesting glitch, which is they built the encoder, the squashing into space, based on one version of the data, and then they realised there's a whole bunch of junk in there, and they built the middle bit on another bunch of clean data. So there's what they call glitch tokens. It's actually an interesting YouTube where you can feed something to ChatGPT that it knows how to encode, but it doesn't know what to do with, and it gives a completely broken answer. But anyway, most tokens it does know what to do with. It represents them as text. It looks from all the text it's learned from, and it suggests the next word probabilistically. The fact that it's got 1 trillion regressions, that it uses 32,000 symbolic tokens for the history of our conversation, and that it's trained on an incredible corpus of 1.2 million words is just a question of scale. It's only now possible because of these exponential technologies. But what it's actually doing is very, very simple. And this is a little theory I've come up with. I'm not saying it's conscious. In fact, I'm saying it's not. But I am saying it's creative. Have we had creativity before without conscious? Where does creativity come from? Creativity in a biological neural network comes from the fact that it's chemically imperfect and we have errors in neurons firing, and they're detected as firing when they weren't. And suddenly we make a cognitive leap, attaching a memory to an idea, to something that was floating around that we saw on TV the other night, and that's a new idea, and that's creative inspiration. Maybe our brain's wired that way. Maybe we're an artist or a musician. But if you have a system that is sufficiently complex, like our brain, or like a 1 trillion parameter model, if you presented a lot of data, like you do to a small baby or someone going through life, or like you do with ChatGPT, and if you have randomness, like we do in our neurons, and randomness is part of that neural network, it doesn't just pick the most likely word, it picks from the most likely words. You put randomness, large amounts of data, and complexity together, and I will say you get out creativity. Now, just for a bonus, let's look at the other one, which is the text-to-art AIs. Same exact idea. Feed me a picture with a text encoding of what you know that picture is. There's 5 billion images on the internet that are labelled. Build a neural network whose task is remove the noise from that picture. So it's a rabbit with dots on it. This says rabbit, and it learns from examples where the rabbit has less dots what it looks like to take the dots out of a rabbit. That's not so smart, right? Do that again and again and again and again and again with images and different amounts of noise. Now, here's the neat bit. Feed it the idea rabbit, and the first picture is complete noise, random noise. And you say, take the noise out of this random noise, given you know it's a rabbit. And then, there's something that is not very rabbit-like, but it's got some noise removed. Do the same trick. Loop it around and around. And that's how we creatively get an image that's never existed before from a neural network that's been trained on basically denoising a bunch of images, and to generalise that. So, what does this mean for culture? Massive, massive, massive disruption. I've been in AI for well over 20 years, and this is the most exciting thing I've seen, and it is happening so quickly. In the last 6 months, we have new professions. I'm a prompt engineer for ChatGPT. And there is a better way to use it than not, so that will be a very real profession. We've seen what Copilot's doing. We've seen that this thing's going to be joining our meetings. I used it all weekend long to cut code. It probably was 4 to 5 times the productivity of me not using it to cut code. What is it going to do to education? What does it do when we hook it up to other important knowledge tools like Wolfram for Science or real-time search? 2 shoe salesmen go to Africa. One of them writes back to base, "Situation terrible, no one wears any shoes here." The other one writes back to base, "Amazing opportunity, they're not wearing shoes yet." What are you going to do with this? And with great power comes great responsibility. And since 2017, whilst the chief data scientist at a large professional services firm, I led a global initiative called Responsible AI. We said you've got to get your why right. What are the ethics behind the way we make these decisions? It's no longer can we do it, it's should we do it. How do we do it? How do you measure performance? How do you make it explainable, unbiased? And you can't. OpenAI have their values and they're going to interject with what they think ChatGPT should say. That's enormous power compared to someone with different political or ideological views. These things were millions of dollars to build. You can now build them for hundreds of dollars in your own organisation with all of your own organisation's documents because it is exponential technology. In fact, the exponential decrease in the cost and effort to build large language models actually comes from the fact that you use ChatGPT to help you build them in the first place, so you bootstrap it. Transparency, explainability, robustness, security, bias, and then how do we govern it? What are the rules underneath it? Don't make statements like none of our employees are going to do this, you will be left behind. Recognise that it is going to drastically affect your workforce. Not everyone's going to embrace it. It's a huge productivity lift, but it's going to change the shape of everything. Was I going to leave you with another quote? I was, but it's left me, so I'm going to finish there.